Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Welcome to your weekly Timbuktu Report. My guest this week, as every week, is Dr. Rick Stevenson, who is a professor of African American history and African American studies at the University of Florida. How you doing, Doc?
I am well, thank you. How are you? You look well tonight. Nice
Thank
colors.
you. Thank you. Thank you. You too, as well. And
Thank
Doc,
you.
we got a new background.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. It reminds me of my alpha days.
Your alpha days.
Yes, the black and
Well,
gold. Very professional, quintessential. You know how we do.
yeah, I got it. I got it. I
I
got it.
like
You
it.
know,
I really
thank
like
you.
it.
Thank you. I will tell my design team that they did a great
Yes,
job. I
they
will let
did
them
an
know that.
amazing job. I am so thoroughly impressed.
Well, for all of our Timbuktu fans, you can now get Timbuktu mugs and t-shirts. Just go to our website at www.atthewellnessnetwork.org. There's the website right there, www.atthewellnessnetwork.org. And
Yeah,
you can be the first on your block to have a
yeah,
Timbuktu mug.
got to
Great
get
gift
it.
idea. Good conversation starter. So,
Yep.
Doc, I
Yes.
appreciate you being here and staying healthy,
Wearing my mask.
wearing your mask. That's what we're going
Working
to be talking about tonight. I mean, it's COVID cases are spiking all across the country,
through the
and
roof.
every corner has nothing to do with rural or urban anymore. Everywhere,
So,
hospitals are maxed out, and the
yeah,
numbers continue to climb every day. We're breaking records in the number of people who are contracting the COVID virus as well as deaths. And unfortunately, African Americans are topping the list in the number of people who are getting it and the number of people who are dying. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, the environmental injustices that happen in this country, and then how COVID plays a role in that. I do hope that you will join the conversation if you've had someone that you know that has been unfortunate to contract the virus, or if you've lost a loved one, our hearts and prayers go out to you and would love
yeah.
to hear from you tonight in this conversation. But Dr. Stevenson, before we get started, if you would, he is not only a professor, but he is a man of the cloth. And we ask you if you would take us to God in prayer.
I would. Let's pray. Lord, even the subject matter that we shared tonight requires your intervention. We are in the midst of not only a devastating virus, but decimation in some communities more than others because of the environment in which we live. And so we pray that you will intervene, that you will not only speed up the um, perfection of this vaccine, but even that our government will begin to take a better look, a more clearer look at the devastation that happens in some communities in regards to pollution and environmental racism as opposed to other communities. So we bless you for knowing that we have this need and that we can trust that you will bring healing to it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. Dr. Stevenson, last Monday, my guest was someone who works at the homeless shelter, one of the homeless shelters out at Grace Marketplace. And she
Mm-hmm.
shared some very, very startling statistics that 40% of homeless people are African Americans. So
Yeah.
while we have this crisis within a crisis of being homeless, and then the COVID virus, and then on top of that, you're African American, and
Yeah.
just in mainstream society where people are sheltered, they are 2 times as likely to die as none or any other group of people in America. Doesn't matter
Exactly.
who they are, African Americans are more likely to die.
Mhm.
How is that possible, and how does that play into environmental injustice?
Well, I think part of it. I think that we have to remember that environmental racism is directly connected to residential segregation. We probably wouldn't have environmental racism if we didn't have such segregated communities. And these communities of segregation actually started back in the early 1900s. So the first thing we have to understand is that environmental racism cannot be separated from racial segregation. Whenever you begin to justify regulating where one group of people can live and exclude another people from that same area, and then ones that you exclude, you put in places where there are high levels of carcinogens, where there's lead in the water, where the soil is contaminated. That kind of environmental racism is going to continue to be a problem in our communities, and we have it quite frequently, like you just said. 2 point, I think it's African Americans are 2.6 times as likely to be tested positive of COVID-19. Is it because of the virus? No, it's because of the carcinogens and the other aspects of our physicality that's affected by this disease. Hypertension, high blood pressure, and all these other issues connect to this increase of COVID-19 in our communities, and it can be directly traced back to environmental racism.
And so when you think about these numbers and the fact that I've not heard any conversation that connects the fact that the Emancipation was signed in 1865.
Hmm.
So that's 155 years ago.
Hmm.
So in 5, 6 generations, a group of people who were strong enough for you to fight a civil war over are now the sickest in your community.
Yeah, yeah,
How is that not alarming? How and why is that not
yeah.
alarming?
You know what's interesting? I think that here's an example. Let me do it this way. Here's an example. So the Trump administration, their EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, concluded way back when he first started that people of color were more likely to live near polluters and breathe polluted air than anyone else, even as the agency started to roll back regulation of pollution. In other words, they recognized that black people lived in these environments that were contaminated, and they still began to dismantle regulations that would reduce their ability. Their capacity to be sick, and it only made it worse. A perfect example of that is how the government and the government's role in the Flint water crisis. That would not have happened in Beverly Hills.
Hmm.
You would not have found the switching of the water source into a community that was predominantly white. And so my point is that the government, these kinds of things don't happen by accident. It's not as if black people, decide, you know what, I think I want to live in a community where there's a high level of carcinogens. That's not what happened. We couldn't buy homes. Why? Because of restricted covenants, because of redlining, because we couldn't get loans. And so these are the kinds of things that underlie these issues in regards to homelessness, COVID-19's effect on our communities, etc.
And when these things, as you talk about where people live, I recall a neighborhood that they started building. Is that me or you with the feedback?
I'm not getting any feedback, but you're freezing a little bit every now and then.
I am.
Hmm.
I don't know what that's about. There was a neighborhood that they built for, wasn't built for black people, but after they discovered that there was a challenge with the soil, they started uh, selling the houses to black folks. And over time, when I'm still amazed at the things that we know about
Hmm.
and sometimes still allow to happen. Um, who's supposed to be the voice, and how do we manage these kinds? Because what we're talking about in environmental, we're talking about the illnesses that are triggered by a food supply in many cases.
Well, the food supply and the water supply. Are you talking about Inkster, Michigan?
No, this was a place in Memphis actually, so it's probably all over the country.
Okay, because Inkster, which means the black ones in German, uh, Inkster was actually built by Henry Ford,
Hmm.
primarily because a lot of African Americans were fleeing the South to work in the Ford factory, which was out in Dearborn. And Dearborn was predominantly white, and the white people didn't want the blacks living in Dearborn, so they lived in Inkster. Uh, um, and so it is not uncommon, it wasn't uncommon in the 1900s, 1930s, especially after the New Deal, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal, that black people were relegated to these communities where they knew um, factories would be built. There was a study done, I can't think of the name, I can't remember the name of the study right now, but there was a study that was done that demonstrated that for the most part, when factories and polluting agencies were going to be built, they targeted black and brown communities.
Hmm.
So these places were, in a sense, deliberately put in an environment where the poor and the impoverished would live, and that's just unconscionable. And yet, that's what America has been about. You cannot separate environmental racism from housing practices. They're tied together.
So, environment, you say you can't separate the two. Environmental racism happens because there are people who are making some decisions,
Right, without our input.
just as interstates were being built
Exactly, through our
through
neighborhood.
through African American communities, and they would just come in, and you
Exactly.
hear the bulldozer.
Exactly. Because the suburb, for instance, up until, I can't think of the date, up until, man, like 1920, 1925, the exact date escapes me. They didn't have suburbs. You either lived in a rural environment or an urban environment. And then right outside of Philadelphia, that's where I grew up, a
Hmm.
guy named William Levitt introduced this new American living environment called the suburb. And the foundation was based on getting all the same kinds of people to live in the same place. And what was interesting about that is the reason they were able to get to the suburbs is because there was an improvement in transportation. And so you have all of these whites who lived in the urban community beginning to move into these suburban communities, suburbs,
Hmm.
because they had transportation that could take them away. Now, they're oftentimes referred to as bedroom communities because people would live in these suburban communities, come into the city to work, go back home. And so what happened was, as we developed this idea of white flight and white people began to leave the cities, that allowed the banks and the mortgage lenders to redline communities so that all of the black people or brown people or poor people were living in the exact same environment.
So, interestingly enough, I was in San Francisco in 2013, when they were opening a new interstate, and there was a documentary about, how and why we have the traffic problems that we have. And
Mhm.
it showed all of the streetcars that were just put in a junkyard
Yeah.
to force people to get vehicles
Mhm.
because of this plan to move people out into these suburban areas.
Yeah.
And now we talk about urban sprawl and the traffic problems that happen. And it
Mhm.
was completely by design.
Exactly. Exactly. Even the Fair Housing Agency came into existence by design to make sure that, certain people had access to mortgages. I mean, even if a black person or a brown person had the money, they had this thing called the Restrictive Covenant. Are you familiar with that? Restrictive covenants?
What did it do?
So a restrictive covenant was it was a collaboration between banks, lenders, mortgage lenders, and homeowners. And they would oftentimes uh, put these covenants in the mortgage agreements. And the covenant said this, and I'm paraphrasing: you cannot sell this house nor this property to a person who is not Caucasian. I mean, this
Mhm.
was the literal language. When I lived in Michigan, I was teaching a course one time on environmental racism and housing, and one of my students lived in a house in Michigan, not too far from where I lived. I lived in Grand Rapids, and this person lived in East Grand Rapids, and she showed me. I still have a copy of it. She showed me a copy of the deed for her house. And it literally had said, this house cannot be sold to a person who is not Caucasian.
Well, you know what? And I'm trying to get my cousin Rosette to call in to join us because it happened to her father. He bought a house in San Francisco, but
Uh
he
huh.
bought it in a neighborhood. The guy just sold it directly to him.
Right.
And I don't want to tell the story incorrectly,
Okay.
but somehow after years of paying, he didn't own the house because he didn't buy it through the way he was supposed to buy it.
He was
He didn't own the house.
didn't own the house. Didn't
So
own.
so those kinds of things. And even as we talk about and we are a part of programs, I was in a meeting today to work with people in certain parts of our community, and I said to them, don't go there acting like you don't know why the situation is the way it is.
Exactly.
We're here to help, but here to help you stir up the gift
Exactly.
because you
Exactly.
have the ability, but there have been systems that were put in place that have prevented you from doing what you have the gift to do. How is it that you need to go and show Black people how to grow some turnip greens?
I don't know. Because we know how to grow turnip. We brought them over here.
We
We,
brought them here. You
we
don't need to
brought
tell me
them
how to grow a sweet potato.
here. Exactly.
We brought them here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there have been environments that have been created that
Yeah.
have caused us to walk away from those things that kept us healthy. And
Yeah.
so now we're the sickest people in the
On,
United States of America.
on the planet.
It is said, Dr. Stevenson, that by the time this is over, 1 in 5 African Americans will die from the COVID virus.
Lord have mercy.
And then there's the side effects of having the virus. And if you
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
dealing with the residual effects of this virus.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I'm afraid of with kids. But I just found this. I want to read this to you. This is the language of a typical restrictive covenant. It says this: hereafter no part of said property or any portion thereof shall be occupied by a person not of the Caucasian race. it being intended hereby to restrict the use of said property against occupancy as owners or tenants of any portion of said property for resident and other purposes by people of the Negro or Mongolian race. That was in a deed for a house that someone could purchase. And I mean, and so when someone says to me, well, racism doesn't really exist, you obviously haven't done your homework, and I think that we have been duped into believing that because we've made some strides in America, that racism is still not a very important part of the way this country functions. I just read another article recently where Trump's his EPA agency recognized that black people and brown people and poor people, their environments were being polluted. Instead of fixing the problem, they rolled back more regulations that would have caused more pollutants in our city. Look at Cancer Alley in Louisiana. The majority of those people live in environments where there's carcinogens in the air all the time. And you know what they're doing? They're dying from COVID because they have compromised immune systems.
Right.
Because of where they live.
Yeah. I lived in New Orleans, and I would see people with knots on them. And I was told that that's, whatever that stuff is would get in fatty cells. It wasn't uncommon to see, and it not that, and I can't remember the name of the illness in the body that causes the tumors. This was just various places. You would see somebody with a knot here, knot there.
That's horrible.
And not only that, but so you have these environments that have been created, and then you have a system that says we're going to come to your aid. We're going to create a business out of coming to your aid.
And the key word is created.
Yeah. Dr. Stevenson, we're talking tonight about environmental justice or injustice, environmental injustice that as it relates to what we're seeing with the COVID numbers. And if you think that racism does not exist in America, please tell me, if we had the climate, if President Barack Obama was in the White House saying that he wasn't going to come out, there would be people who would be willing to burn the White House down to get him out.
Burn it down.
And if you think, this is not, you got to be sober-minded here.
Yeah, you do.
When you look at this situation, and just as a sober-minded human, if you cannot see that there is absolutely no way in the world a man or woman of color would be able to hold the United States of America hostage.
Hostage. That's right.
The United States of America is currently being held hostage. We're in a pandemic, and the person that can help still work. He's still president, so why not come out and be president?
Why not help?
You're still president. So for those people who are watching who say that he won, whether he won or not, the fact is today, November 19th, he's still president. So we're in a pandemic. Why not come out and be presidential?
Exactly.
Because you're still president until you're not in there anymore.
Right. And deal with these issues.
And deal with the issues. And it's just amazing to me that our minds are so warped that we can't see this is just, I don't understand it. I don't understand this situation. I don't understand the people around him.
Yeah.
And it has absolutely nothing to do with who you vote for. It's about doing right.
Right.
This virus does not know anything about a political party.
Right.
They're Democrats and Republicans hurting and dying.
That's right.
It
We
is
have,
as if it has formed, this whole scenario has created an autoimmune disease that America is being, it's almost like we're killing each other. We're killing each other with hate.
hmm
This virus is taking advantage of that, the fact that we're divided with such hatred.
hmm
And the stress of all of it, the
hmm
stress that the 72 million are under, or the 75 million, or
hmm
those who didn't vote.
hmm
This is
hmm
a, a crisis that supersedes anything the world has ever seen, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. And you know what's interesting? I was listening to an article today, and the newscaster was saying that if a 3-year-old child gets COVID, that child cannot be quarantined by itself because it cannot take care of itself,
Right.
which means it needs a parent to take care of it. So now you have two people who need to be quarantined, right?
Right.
And the person was saying that at a minimum, uh, that person will be out of work maybe 28 days. And when you look at some of the black and brown communities, some of these parents have 2 and 3 kids.
Right.
So if one kid gets sick, then they're all sick. Now this is not happening, in Prince George County. This is not happening in Hale Plantation. It's not happening in some of these environments where the 1% live. It's happening in these communities where people can't afford to take off work, where
Right.
they don't have the kinds of medical care, where they don't have access to various kinds of food substances and they're living in food deserts. And yet, as you said, the person who is in a position to assist in the transition and also the rollout of the solutions to the problem is holding up the works. And like you said, if President Barack Obama had to try something like that, they'd have burned 1600 down.
In a heartbeat.
It's horrible. And I think that we have to get to a place where we cannot be cowarded into not confronting and expressing our views on the issues. This has, in my mind, has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the fact that people are dying. This is
Yes.
about humanity. This is about people because I read another article where even members in the White House, some of the congressional leaders have come down with COVID, right? Because they're making stupid decisions. And how is it are we getting how have we been so fooled by this administration that we are neglecting the science that says there are very basic principles to protection. Wear a mask, social distancing, no more than 10 people in a room. Why is it that we cannot figure out that this virus is real? There are 250 million answers to that question, and they're all dead. And guess what? The numbers are going to continue to go up until we figure out that we have to throw aside these issues of race and separatism and get the problem solved.
Yeah. I think about Jim Jones
In Guyana,
in Guyana.
okay.
And there were people standing next to Jim Jones when he gave the instructions to raise the cup to drink the Kool-Aid.
hmm
There were people around him who could have said to the masses, "Don't do it."
Right.
And they elected not to.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, that's what we have right now. We
Right.
have people who know right from wrong. And as that quote, evil prevails when good men and women do nothing.
Do nothing.
And
Yeah.
as Dr. King said, we don't remember the words of our enemies. We remember the silence of our friends.
hmm
And that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
Um, a friend of mine who is a foster parent, her little girl she's fostering, the bus driver caught tested positive.
Jesus.
So now she's quarantined
Yeah.
for 14 days
Yeah.
with her foster child. And, it doesn't matter whether it's foster or biological, this is a situation. She can't leave the house because the child's bus driver tested positive.
Lord
This
have mercy.
is this, and I even heard somebody say, well, there's some people who are going to die. They were going to, of course, none of us are going to live forever. But let's not go stand in the middle of the interstate and see if we can brace the Mack truck.
Exactly. 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 And exactly. And going back to what you said earlier about the environment, when a group of people can sit around a table and redline a community and then allow dumps and factories that pollute to be built right in a community that you just redlined, knowing that these pollutants could kill, that is just preposterous. That's just unconscionable. And yet it happens all the time. Our
Yeah.
communities are devastated because of so many people uh, being willing to drink the Kool-Aid, as you put it. And I just think that if those of us who have a voice, those of us who have a platform, we have the responsibility to challenge everyone. Because here's the deal, and I'll stop. You never know when you're going to be that close or be that one who gets sick.
No, you don't know.
I just recently didn't have to take it, but I did. Took a COVID test because I teach.
Hmm.
And, occasionally I'll go into my office at school. I don't want my students to get sick, and I don't want to get sick. And, and,
Right.
and, and wearing a mask and doing these kind of preventive measures does not make you a chump. It makes you wise.
And it
Wisdom.
has nothing to, yeah, I'm quite sorry and disappointed that someone's life, they think that it is more important for them to identify with a group of people than save their life as well as their loved ones. You know, my sister contracted polio during the polio epidemic when so many people were sick and died as a result of that. And so I know firsthand from the journey that my sister Hattie has been on
Yeah,
that this is real, just
yeah,
as real as polio was. And I have known too many people who have lost loved ones in this COVID pandemic. And what I will say is more than anything else, for everybody, as we're waiting on a vaccine, what you can do is everything in your power to build up your immune system. Start taking your health into your own hands
yeah,
and look at what can I do to make me healthier so that I can fight COVID and everything else that
yeah,
might come my way.
yeah,
Because apparently nobody's concerned about you but you.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and then be wise.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
told that in my hometown of Jackson, Tennessee, and Dr. Claybrook is joining us from
Hmm.
Humboldt, Tennessee, that the ban had been lifted on wearing a mask. They just put it back on a couple weeks ago. But
Hmm.
people, do you need a mandate? Do you need somebody to tell you to protect your own health?
Yeah,
If the virus is there,
right,
and guess what? If it's not there and there's just the possibility, what's it going to hurt to put a mask on? You're
exactly.
not that cute
It's
that you
going to be
can't cover
uncomfortable.
up your
Yeah,
face and your nose. Just put it on.
exactly. Yeah, I think that for a lot of Americans, we have become just too entitled, and we are unwilling to make the necessary sacrifices for other people. I'll give you an example. My father passed a year ago last month, and my mother just moved back into the house where my mother and father lived after his homegoing. She had been staying with my sister, so because she was going back home for the first time, all of us, I have a brother in DC, two sisters in Philly, we all got together because we wanted to go back and be with our mother. But when I got there, I couldn't even hug her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wore a mask, she wore a mask, we all had masks on, and we social distanced the entire time. Now I was glad to see her. You know, I hadn't seen her since my dad's homegoing, but I wasn't going to risk killing my mother.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and I hadn't just positive or anything, but the point is precautions, you know,
Mm-hmm.
safety first, safety second, safety always. That there should never be an option for that.
Right.
And you know, I had to fly. I flew from Florida to Philadelphia, you know, to just look at a person, right? So I think that that kind of social tenacity that is necessary, and we've got to model it. We cannot afford to especially for Black and brown people, we cannot afford to make these mistakes because we're going to die, and some of the other cultural groups are not, right,
Right.
as quickly. Not that the disease doesn't affect people of other cultures. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that because of the environments in which we live, because of, as you said, our health conditions, we are more susceptible to this virus. You know, African Americans are 2.6 times more likely to test positive and 4.7 times more likely to be hospitalized than anybody else on the planet. The stats don't lie.
So if you're watching this and we are entering into the holiday season, and as you pointed out, you know, you all traveled, but you kept your distance. With the rate that this is going up, I would love, you know, my good friend and cousin, Captain Varisa Booker's mother passed.
Hmm.
And I would love to be able to go back and be with them. But we're going to have a virtual service on
Hmm.
Saturday.
Hmm.
And that's the safest that we can be. She said somebody, they had, you know, planned something, but one of the people that would, if they had been able to have a normal service, um, it positive. She's sick with COVID. So this is real. And I wish people would not allow this political climate to make them to suck them into making decisions,
Hmm.
nonsensical
Hmm.
decisions.
Exactly.
As Dr. Flora Claybrook said, how has so many people been bamboozled?
Sounds like Malcolm X.
Bamboozled by uh, Trump is what her question is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I know the answer to that because
Yeah.
it's one thing for you to be committed to your party. It's
Yeah.
another thing for you to um, go down on the sinking ship
Yeah.
because in the end, when we stand before our creator, Donald Trump is going to be in the same line you're in.
Mm.
He's not going to be able to save you.
Probably not.
Well, he's in line to be judged.
Oh, because he's not going to be in the same line with me.
We all got to be judged, is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
You
but
know,
my
Doc,
sins have already been
you
judged.
may get tested one last time. He may be standing right next to you. It's your test. Show love. Show love. Pray for your leaders. That's what the word says. Isn't that right? Dr. Claybrook, pray for your leaders. So,
Yeah, we
yeah.
do that, right?
So the point is, how is it that you have a belief system that goes against the one who created you?
Right, right,
That's
right.
that's just bizarre. That's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
bizarre to me.
yeah.
And then, as I said, all of those who are standing around watching people drink the Kool-Aid and they know what's in the Kool-Aid and they won't tell them.
Well, I think part of the answer to your question though is understanding this notion of white supremacy and manifest destiny. There are still people in America who believe that they have been chosen to be the superior race. And and Barack Obama was giving an interview just recently about his book, and he was saying that the problems that we're having here in regards to the racial divide was not started by Donald Trump. It had been going on for decades, but he did add fuel to it. You know, he was an incendiary device that allowed it to flame up, if you will.
Hmm.
And so there were always hundreds of thousands of people who felt that their country was being taken away from them. But what he has done is he has allowed them to come out from behind the rocks and now the woodwork, and then make those statements of racial divide public with impunity. And I think that's what the problem is. It's not like it wasn't already there. It's always been there. It's just that we had gotten to a place where people did it behind closed doors. Now he has made it okay, you know, to be a racist in public, and people are just taking advantage of it.
Well, and how do you how do you account for the people that look like you and me?
Well, then that's all your skin folk and your kin folk. That's all I'm saying. You can't.
I never heard that.
You know, I don't. Again, if I could explain that, you and I would probably be doing this on CNN.
Well, we
Um,
should be. We should be anyway. That's where
but
we ought to be.
I think that your one's ethnicity does not prevent one from being bamboozled.
Yeah. Well, we used to have a closer relationship with the Lord that gave us a conscience.
Sure.
And I don't know, maybe I don't know what happened with that. You know, and even as we're looking at the votes, and let's talk about political racism, voter suppression, and
Vice versa.
even as the phone calls have been made to insist that votes not be
That is
counted.
crazy.
How can you, you know, when I think about the fact that President Barack Obama had to denounce Pastor Jeremiah Wright
Right.
for saying that the chickens had come home to roost.
Right.
He was not even allowed to have an opinion.
Right. Right.
And here we have a situation where someone is withholding information that
Exactly.
will impact. There were
Exactly.
people who will die as a result. There are people who died to begin with because the reports say that he knew in January.
Exactly.
So there were people who died as a result of us not knowing about it soon enough.
Right.
And now, on this end of his administration, he is still withholding information,
Exactly.
and 7 out of 10 Republicans are still supporting what he's doing.
That's just unbelievable to me. It's it is again. I knew Dr. Wright. Doctor, when I taught at Fuller Seminary, Dr. Wright would come there to LA every year, and he would do a series of sermons at Westminster church, and in LA, and I would take my homiletics class to hear him preach because of his style and because of his technique, his hermeneutic. He was a great example of black preaching, if you will. And you're right. When President Obama went through that phase of quote disconnect unquote, and then we look at what's going on today, I'm just appalled that America can be just that racist. And yet we shouldn't be surprised because, again, I don't think that it's new. It's just that it has been repackaged and the genie is now out of the bottle. And if we haven't learned anything from COVID, COVID has shown us just how divided we are. Healthcare, education, housing, you name it. We are black people, brown people, poor people. We are suffering at every single ledge, and the elites are not concerned about it.
School systems in New York closing down.
Yep.
Parents who still have
Yep.
jobs that they have to go to. Families who can't afford the computers, and
Yep.
those who don't have the know-how to help
Yep.
instruct their children to use the software. It will be our children who fall behind educationally.
Educational racism.
And there again, another barrier that the COVID children will have to bear.
Exactly.
My heart goes out to the parents, to the
Exactly.
children, and you know, as someone said who works with some students in East Tennessee, um, she said, I was working with kids who were already so far behind
Exactly.
already.
Mm.
And then you add them having to be educated at home by people who didn't go to school to be educators.
Come on now. You're
So if
absolutely
the
right.
ones who went to school to be educated didn't have them where they needed to be,
Hmm.
what do we expect? What is going to happen with these babies?
Exactly.
I yeah, our test scores were not the greatest. We were like 35-25 in math and science in the world. Who knows where we will fall as a result of this? So this is not just about a political party. Can y'all hear me?
Right.
This is about lives. This is about the education system. This is about the workforce of America.
Exactly. Exactly.
The
That's
workforce of
exactly.
America.
When you talk about education, it blows my mind when we look at urban schools as compared to suburban schools. Urban. I mean, educational racism uh, is seen in the fact that a lot of your urban schools don't have the systems, the equipment, the technology, even the teachers, um, and don't and this and teachers. Please don't get me wrong on this, but the higher paid teachers are not in the urban environments.
Right.
They're in the suburbs. We don't have after school programs. If nothing else, do we need math and science and English and writing skills? Absolutely. But we also need the arts. We need music. We need athletics. We need painting. We need, architecture. We need design. I lived in a place in Michigan where three to five schools have been shut down in a 5 or 6 year period, and they were shut down because they couldn't afford the after school programs. There were no. One school even had to lose its football program. Then you could drive 10 miles south from where I lived, and one of the high schools had its own performing arts building with a TV studio in it. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we're, being affected by. The educational racism is also a part of environmental racism. Because
Right.
when these kids can't find employment, you know what they're going to do? They're going to tear down your houses. They're going to break into your bars. They're going to sell drugs. I mean, people are going to survive, and so we have to. And with COVID and the people not getting the kind of education they need, later on, it's going to show up.
Oh yeah.
It's going to show up. And these kids who will not finish high school, who will not finish junior high, middle school, they will be your next level of criminals. And what's going to happen? The prison population is going to increase. I mean, the ripple effect to this thing is just magnanimous.
And the prisons will get paid $30,000 to $60,000 a year
They're going
to
to get paid.
house you. They can't get funding for education.
They're going to get paid.
We talk about the ripple effect and the people who will be homeless because they cannot work, and the children who will be homeless because their parents are
Mm-hmm.
homeless or parents die
Mm-hmm.
as a result of this. Remember, if the statistics are correct, 1 in 500 African Americans. And the young lady that I interviewed who works with a homeless shelter, 40% of homeless people in this country are African Americans.
Yep.
So we're 13% of the population. We are probably 80% of the jail population. I don't know exactly,
55.
but about 85?
55.
How much? 55. Okay.
55%. Mm-hmm.
So we're 13% of America's population. We're 40% of the homeless. We're 55% of the jail population. And what she said to me, even in the homeless population, there's an assessment test that homeless people are given
Mm-hmm.
to show whether they qualify for certain services. She
Mm-hmm.
said the test is skewed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
more Black people don't qualify
Exactly.
for the services that are even available for homeless people,
Exactly.
designed for them not to qualify.
Designed for them to fail.
And I'm gonna tell you what I said to her. Any church organization that gets on a plane to go do a mission trip,
Right.
you need to look around in your community
Exactly.
because we need to start with the homeless people. They need a voice. And if 40% of them look like us, it is not just because of substance abuse. They're people who really have had challenges.
That's right.
And then the mentally ill who really cannot fend for themselves. And they're not getting what they need. And it's our folks.
And those who are mentally ill or have disabilities or disabled learning abilities are now being released from prison to make room for others. And now our streets are just loaded with people who become targets of abuse, all
Right.
sorts of abuse. So,
Right.
I mean, again, this ripple effect is going to be so out of control in the next 5 or 10 years that we're not going to know the United States.
Hmm.
I I can't even imagine what my grandson and my great granddaughter will grow up to because and again we can't blame it all on the present administration, but I got to tell you they're going to go down in history with a asterisk next to their names.
Well, it has been said that the United States of America was rapidly growing into the haves and the have-nots.
Mm-hmm.
However rapidly it was to take place, rest assured, COVID has put it on the fast track, the
Yes, it has.
accelerated
It's
track.
accelerating. It has.
And Dr. Stevenson, in our final moments that we have here, as we're talking about environmental racism and how it is playing a role in what's happening in
Mm-hmm.
homes across our communities and across the country with people contracting COVID-19 and getting sick and dying, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the other issues as it relates to environmental racism. What is it that the average person can do?
Well, first of all, we can pray. I mean, we can never not seek the wisdom of God. But also, even in the case of social distancing, we can use our various social media platforms just to reach out to people. One of the things that people are experiencing now, also with COVID, is COVID fatigue, the inability to connect with other people. Just the other day, I just sent out maybe 25 messages to people I haven't seen or spoken with since I moved down here. Just to say, hey man, how you doing? Praying for you, thinking for you. Some of my colleagues where I work at the university, I haven't seen since March. Literally,
Yeah.
have not seen since March. Just shoot a quick email, a quick text, or however you communicate, just to say, hey man, I'm thinking about you, because people are getting isolated. I think the next thing is to look at organizations that are already engaged. Look at some of these hospitals where the doctors and the nurses and the staff are overwhelmed. Shoot them a quick email. And a quick text. Just a word of, you'll be surprised how far a word of encouragement can go to someone who is stressed because every single day they have to go into a COVID environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I can only imagine how some of those head nurses would feel if they just got 5 or 10 letters from random people, emails, texts to the hospital, to the switchboard that said, hey man, we're thinking about you, we're praying for you, we appreciate the work you're doing, thank you for your service. I mean, something like that is, I think, very important. And that is, just foundationally some of the things I think that we could do.
And what about helping to change some of these policies and engaging with decision makers?
Well, I think that's not going to happen until next time we have an election. We missed a lot of down ballot voting this semester. I think that black people.
You said this semester, you're talking in
Yeah, I mean
collegiate terms.
this cycle, this cycle.
But it's not too late to start making your decisions about getting involved with those who are there. And
Exactly, I
then,
agree.
you know,
Writing letters to
walk
your
walk the
Congress.
walk. You may decide you want to run.
No, yeah, you might. You might. I think that some of these people who are in office, they need to know if they don't act right, they won't be in office too much longer. We have to become more sophisticated about down ballot voting, and not only voting in the general, voting in the primary, paying attention to various amendments and so on. So I think we talked about this before, that we have to be better educated when it comes to our own city and federal government politics.
Right. And I'm looking here because um, Commissioner Vivian Rogers in Selma, Alabama, this week was the first African American elected to the commission there. She
Wow.
is the cousin of my friend McLinda, and McLinda went there for a swearing in.
Hmm.
She ran a race. Her opponent, get this. So when you think that you can't make a difference and you might be interested in running for office, you can do it. Her
Hmm.
opponent spent $100,000 in the race. She spent 3,000.
Wow.
They asked her who was her campaign manager. Jesus.
See?
So we say congratulations to Commissioner Vivian Rogers of
Congratulations.
District 2 in Selma, Alabama, 2020. Finally, an African American on the
Isn't
commission
that
in
something?
Selma, Alabama. So, all of us who are feeling these feelings of something must change, let
Yeah.
maybe you're the change.
Yeah.
Maybe you're the change.
Yeah.
Joan Stevens, thank you for joining. Great ideas about reaching out to connect, to show appreciation. Also, this morning on the prayer call that I'm on, someone mentioned the nursing homes. You know,
Yes.
just
God.
go, just go get a bunch of cards.
They're devastated.
and they may hold them for 3 days before they pass them out. But
Mhm.
take some cards, just some "Hello, how are you" cards
Yeah,
to those nursing homes
yeah,
where family members can't go in and
sure.
visit people, and to say thank you to those folks who are working and putting themselves in harm's way.
Yeah,
It is a challenge for all of us.
it
It's a
absolutely
challenge
is.
for all of us. But whatever challenge I'm facing, Doc, I realize it's minuscule.
Yeah,
And my prayers go out to all of my family members and friends who are in the healthcare profession. My brother Reginald Marshall in
yeah,
Nashville, Chelsea Thrasher in Louisville, Kentucky, um, um, Carrie Knox, my friend Carrie Knox, who's in Jackson, Tennessee,
yeah.
Diane in Memphis, Diane Pierce in Memphis, all of our family members and friends who are doing everything that they can. And
Yeah.
let us just collectively
Mm-hmm.
pray that the power of God will soften hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And while you think you can't do anything, if you know what's right, if you step out, you never know how many more people around you feel the same way and they
Exactly.
just need somebody to lead.
That's right.
And then guess what? If you believe the scriptures, it says, when I'm for you, I'm more than the whole world against you.
That's right. That's right.
Talk to David
Amen.
and go on out there and know that this is what I tell me. Me plus God is a majority. Do not
Majority.
call me a minority.
That's right. That's right.
Dr. Stevenson,
Yes, ma'am.
is next Thursday Thanksgiving?
It sure is. So
So
I
we
gave
got,
my students the day off.
you're so thoughtful. So next Thursday, are we going to do a Thanksgiving show or are we going to skip next week?
I don't know what you gonna do. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I am gonna cook some turkey drumsticks.
Okay.
So
You
I'll,
might be asleep. Is that what you're
I
trying to
might
say?
be.
Okay.
I don't know. Let's talk. What do you think? Let's do a poll.
Yeah. Should we do a show
Ask
next
ask
Thursday?
our viewers to
So we
write
have
it to see if we can.
Joan and Kara and
Yeah,
Dr.
someone write
Quaywood
it and see what happens.
that have made comments on whether or not we should. Well, there'll be a lot of people at home
Yeah,
um, chilling after the meal, or
yeah,
they might even be eating
right. Because
during that time.
some people won't even start eating until 6.
So, did you come to our house for Thanksgiving or Christmas?
It was Thanksgiving. It was the day before my birthday. Because you threw a birthday party for me, remember?
The next day. We won't
That's
be able
right.
to do that this year. So it
We
was
had a social
Thanksgiving. That's
distance birthday
right.
party.
Yeah,
We
you
met
got to.
a year ago, the day before my birthday.
Well, look, I just think just on for that reason, we have to do a show,
Okay. So we should do a birthday show, huh?
a birthday show, and invite some of your friends to come on and say happy birthday
We'll do it. I mean, do you remember what happened that night?
at the birthday party.
No, the night before, because that's how the birthday party started. We had all that food,
We had a lot of food.
and you asked us what were we doing, and we said, we were going to see some friends, but it was my birthday, and you said, well, we got all this food. Why don't you come on back? We had a cake and everything, and
Yeah, yeah.
that's how we met.
I know, I know. Joan and I were on a call today, and we were talking about what we prepared for Thanksgiving. So Joan says, do a show. Joan and I were talking, along with Karen, we were talking about what we prepared for
Mhm.
Thanksgiving, and I was telling her about my dressing, and she said, "Oh, it sounds good. So can you give a review? And you, Dr. Stevenson, give a
Yeah,
review to Joan on the meal last year?"
yeah, the meal was through the roof. That's why we came back the next day. It was because we had just moved here. Well, my wife had just gotten here. I came in August, but yeah, we were still starting to meet people. Matter of fact, we came with Steve and Robin.
Steve, and guess what? And I met Robin at a antique shop.
Is that right?
Met Robin at an antique shop, and I had asked about black memorabilia, and she overheard me ask about it.
Hmm.
And so she comes up to me very quietly, "If you don't mind, I have something that you might like. And she gave me a kitchen towel that has a mammy on it.
Shut the front door.
And that's how I met you, because of a mammy kitchen towel.
Yeah, Steve and I played tennis together.
Yeah, yeah. And so I collect that because
Yeah,
to me, those women were virtuous women as far as I'm concerned. They
absolutely.
breastfed. They loved when they were not being loved.
You know what we should do then? If you want to do it next week, we
What?
should do a session on African American culinary culture.
How about that? Joan says, "Can you post your recipe, even though it's in off the cuff?" Yeah, it is a really off the cuff kind of thing. As my daddy used to say when we would ask him about the recipe for his barbecue sauce, he would say,
Yeah,
"It's on my tongue." I said, "What do
yeah,
you mean it's on your tongue?" When I taste it, I know it's right.
that's right. And I would always say, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. So,
Joe, we may have to make the dressing together. So we may have to make some dressing after COVID. And we
yeah,
get together and I just kind of show you what I do.
right.
I don't mind sharing my recipe.
Yeah, me neither.
Joan, you know, I'm not sure it's going to taste like mine, but I'll tell you. Oh, Lordy, Lordy. Well, Doc,
Yes.
so yeah, so we'll plan to do something next week. Thank you,
Okay.
Joan, for that vote of confidence.
All right. We still want to see how many people will vote.
Yeah, to see. I'll have to
See
do a
what they say.
poll.
Yeah, do a
Yeah.
little poll. How many
You know,
people in the session next week?
I actually have the capabilities of doing this on this software, but I just don't know how to do it.
Okay.
Dr. Rick Stevenson, we have talked tonight about environmental racism, the
Yeah.
challenges that we continue to face in the United States of America in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of an administration that is withholding information that could and will impact lives in this country,
Mhm.
impact the lives of America. As far as I'm concerned, we are in the midst of domestic terrorism, and it's coming from our White House. We need to call it what it is. When you are impacting lives and people die, regardless to who causes the death, it's
Yeah,
wrong.
it's wrong.
It's wrong. So if you are concerned about unborn, the unborn, if you're concerned about the unborn and you're not concerned about the born, the ones that are already living,
Hmm.
that's pretty hypocritical, is all I can tell you.
Critical. Absolutely.
All righty. Thank you, Doc.
Have a
Thank
good one.
you. Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us for
Right.
this edition of the Timbuktu Report, where our goal is to enlighten and inspire. If we don't see you next week, we certainly hope that you will join us for our Thanksgiving edition of the Timbuktu Report. You have a wonderful holiday weekend and be safe.
Amen. Wait.
For wear your mask. For our entire crew of the Timbuktu Report, we thank you so much for joining us. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing at the well. Make it a great moment. God bless you.